However, later on we see that Sung-hyo didn't allow Suk-ryu to read his letter, and the man even feels embarrassed about his past self for having left such an obvious clue about his feelings. The next day, while the pair are in Sung-hyo's office, Mr. Myung-woo brings fantastic news for the company's growth. Grape, the former company where the protagonist worked and a major player in the market, is going to build a headquarters in Korea. So, they contacted Myung-woo asking for a design for the new building, along with 4 other offices, and the one they like best will be chosen. Even though Sung-hyo knows that just hearing the name Grape affects his best friend, this is an opportunity they can't miss, and since Suk-ryu is the only one in the room who speaks fluent English, she ends up becoming part of the project. Meanwhile, Mi-suk and Hae-suk have dinner together and complain about their partners, while their husbands do the same. Moving on to Moum, she realizes how small Korea can be when she runs into that journalist again. At that moment, she starts to suspect who sent her the rice cakes, and when Sung-hyo arrives with Suk-ryu, things get even stranger, since in a way it seems like everyone has met Dan-ho at some point. But what bothers Moum the most is how similar her tastes are to the journalists. Later, the trio is walking home when the protagonist brings up the time capsule, and at that moment, Sung-hyo freezes upon discovering that Moum had dug up the object earlier and read the letters, which means his friend probably knows about his feelings for Suk-ryu. However, since Moum doesn't mention it, he just suffers in silence. The next day, during an online meeting, Suk-ryu sets up a meeting with the Grape representative. However, after her friends leave the call and only the protagonist remains, she overhears the representative, who forgot to turn off her microphone, talking to the coordinator about how they've already chosen the winner, meaning her friends will just be wasting time putting together the whole project. Because of this, Suk-ryu can't keep the secret and soon tells her best friend, who, although a bit shaken by the news, thinks it's best to act as if he doesn't know anything, so at least they can try and also not hurt Myung-woo. Meanwhile, the journalist has recently moved to the house across from Moum's, so he ends up meeting the trio's mothers, and they're all impressed by his manners and good looks. Since we're talking about Moum, she's at the park enjoying her day off when she suddenly meets a little girl who's a lot like her as a child in terms of loving aliens, which makes Moum try hard to win the child over and become her friend. Later on, we switch to Dan-ho, who is still unpacking boxes from the move, and among the memories, he finds a photo that makes him recognize the protagonist. It turns out that a few years ago, the journalist photographed that competition where Sung-hyo took first place, and among the photos was the pair. Dan-ho immediately sent the memory to Sung-hyo, who was happy to receive it, and it even encouraged him to make up with his friend. The time for the meeting with Grape arrived, and things would have gone smoothly if the protagonist's former boss hadn't been there. As soon as Suk-ryu saw Chris, Sung-hyo already knew something was wrong. The man had mistreated the protagonist a lot at Grape, he was even one of the reasons she quit. Overloading Suk-ryu was just one of the many things he did, including making disgusting comments. Because of this, our dear protagonist was unsettled remembering everything and had to take a break to go to the bathroom. As Suk-ryu was returning to the meeting room, Chris was in the hallway, and fortunately, he brought up the subject. I say fortunately because, right after, seeing his best friend falling apart with a mix of emotions because of this guy who kept disrespecting her, Sung-hyo confronted Chris, which ended up revealing this darker side of him to the rest of the Grape staff. Suk-ryu didn't let Sung-hyo punch the man, in fact, she handled it herself. Myung-woo, taking advantage of the fact that he follows Grape's partner on Instagram and interacts a lot with him, sent the audio from the meeting where Chris admitted to everything bad he had done to our protagonist. All these accumulated events led to Chris losing his job, and the office came out ahead because, even though they didn't get the main contract, Grape gave them a smaller project for a store that will be built. To top off the day, Sung-hyo takes his friend to a bridge where people put locks, usually with the couple's names written on them and the key thrown away. However, this time, he wrote down everything bad he wished would happen to Chris and those who mistreated his friend, and then locked it, as if it were a curse, which made the protagonist, and me, laugh sincerely. The next day, Sukryu is once again in Sunghyo's office. It almost seems like she works there now. But suddenly, while they were talking, a woman arrived and hugged the man, leaving both the protagonist and Sunghyo surprised. From the way Mr. Myungwoo talks to the woman, it seems she is Sunghyo's ex who left him at the time to be with another man. Taehui is there to offer a project to Sunghyo, which, under pressure from his partner, he ends up accepting. Sukryu updates us on the man's relationship with this person. They dated when Sunghyo was in college, and as mentioned before, she left him to be with another guy. Later, while heading home and deep in thought about his day, Sunghyo ran into Sukryu's father, who invited him for a drink, and he accepted. As a result, he ended up sleeping at the protagonist's house, and when he woke up the next day with the woman hitting him, because she thought she was waking up her brother, in his panic, Sunghyo ended up hitting his foot on the wardrobe and tearing a ligament. Feeling somewhat responsible for what happened to her friend, Sukryu spends the whole day accompanying him to all his appointments to make sure he'll be okay. This leads the two of them to meet with Taehui, since the meeting was already scheduled and Sunghyo couldn't leave her hanging. Then, at a certain moment, when the two were alone and Sukryu was distracted, we see Taehui confessing to the man that she still feels attracted to him. Meanwhile, Moum went to respond to an emergency, and when she arrived, it was that little girl she had met in the park. The child was home alone and burning with fever, so she was rushed to the hospital. And when her guardian arrived at the emergency room in a panic, Moum was surprised to find out it was Dan-ho. Back to the former couple, while they were talking alone again, after Taehui and Sukryu had become good friends, the woman revealed the real reason she broke up with Sunghyo. Taehui always felt like she liked him more than he liked her, so she went looking for someone who would reciprocate her feelings in the same way. And continuing the conversation, Sunghyo finally started to realize that he has always loved Sukryu, and that feeling continues to this day. This topic carries on the next day, because when the protagonist entered Sunghyo's room while he was in the shower, she found the letter he had written to put in the time capsule. In other words, now she knows about her friend's feelings, even though Sunghyo tries to excuse what's written as just a joke. Well, as the day goes on, Sukryu focuses on what she wants to do with her life now, and since she has always loved cooking, she decides to pursue this path by enrolling in some classes to learn more. Meanwhile, Sunghyo decides to avoid the protagonist after her new discovery, so the architect meets up with the journalist to pass the time and even ends up venting about his feelings in an indirect way. The next day, we see Sunghyo at a gathering with former co-workers, but before the night ends, he notices that Sukryu's father is also there, accompanied by another woman. After thinking it over, Sunghyo decides to talk to him. In the same episode, the reason comes up. It seems that Gunsik needs money because he was scammed by two YouTubers who went to his restaurant and made a misleading video, putting hair in the food and even accusing him of pouring hot water on them, when in reality it was just an accident. Because of this, Gunsik became a rideshare driver to cover the payment the YouTubers demanded, but his absence from the restaurant led to overdue bills, which caused the family to find out soon after Sunghyo caught him that day. So, even though her father told her not to get involved, the next day the protagonist goes after camera footage to prove the YouTuber's scam, but Sunghyo was already one step ahead. He exposed the two guys and even brought the journalist along to threaten to do a story about their scam. Of course, the two tried to run away, but Sukryu and her brother showed up to help. Even after going through this together, Sunghyo keeps his distance from the protagonist, and she can't understand where she went wrong in their friendship. Then, when Sukryu finally realizes that her friend has always liked her and is ready to talk about it, her ex returns to Korea and finds the two of them in the middle of the street. What did you think of these episodes? I hope you enjoyed the recap. Leave your suggestions in the comments and subscribe. If you liked the video, like and share to help me out. See you next time.